Praise be to blessed Zunki. It's Cisco Mute here with an old world battle report. So this is battle number 8. So this was from a while ago, and it was against Bretonnia. It was my opponent's first or second game, and so I'd rate this as probably a medium power level. A Carnosaur, was coming. We weren't going all out on things, but it was higher than most of the casual games. In it, my Slanlord Zinfernok. Now, might have narrative sort of Slanlords. He's fanatical, fire based. I imagine he's one of the Slan who range far out of Lustria. That said, it was originally envisioned as taking salamanders and with him and Bastillodons and all that sort of thing. The salamanders don't make an appearance for how bad they are, but he has a law familiar with the standard sort of fit out for fire magic. He's ethereal, and he is the battle standard bearer. Scarvet as a Scaramani is in it. This is a pretty standard fit out for Scarvets, and this was a rolled scenario, and it was the one where the game's basically over straight away as soon as they get to 25% less of their troops, and the battle lines were 18 inches apart. So as we come into it, this is how it's set up. Not a lot of painted here from me, but my opponent had a beautiful Bretonnian army. I liked how it looked. My Scarvet, I was going to back to take them down. I looked a bit outnumbered, but and I didn't like my solar engine should have been really firing at knights more so, but this is how we were. Now my skinks come up. They start throwing javelins. I think I maybe got a wound, one single wound onto the Pegasus Knights, or maybe none. It was a pretty poor phase. Everything else just moves up slightly. And his Pegasus Knights charged the Skinks. They stood and shot, and I think they did my wound there in the stand and shoot. And frankly, I did a wound, and I got a bit lucky. About half of them were out, but they still fell back in good order. And those knights there just obliterated those skinks, and everything else of his moves up slightly, and I get plenty of arrows pegging into my Carnosaur. Okay, so looks like he deleted 5 of those skinks, and over here it was 6. So now this was an interesting one. His knights, these weren't the awesome knights, but they ploughed into my Croxicor there, and I was really trying to avoid that charge. I was hoping that I really mucked up my positioning. I was still sort of learning, so I'm like, fantastic. Now the Croxicor are going to get rolled, and the Carnosaur charged his Pegasus Knight, his lord, and we were all pretty confident that each of our lords would win. And the Bastillodon had a difficult charge, but did make it. I believe actually what happened was the unit here charged, they fire and fled, which led enough room for us to get that done. Now, the fun part of this, one of the reasons this battle memory sticks in my memory, is the Slan decided, I'm charging the Pegasus Knights. Now, my opponent was a bit surprised by this. I also wondered if we had have ranked them up, whether there would have been room, but this is Battle 8. But, he's ethereal. They didn't have magic weapons, so I thought this might be, and I had hammer hands, this might be a good turn. And funnily enough, that's more or less what happened. Now, they rolled quite poorly when they were attacking the Skinks, really poorly, and they only managed to kill a couple. And meanwhile, we did a wound, we had a closed order, and we had a battle standard, and we ended up winning by 1. They gave ground, and the Slan followed up, but the Skinks didn't. And there he was, trapped in a combat with something that I'm +2 as a static, and he absolutely cannot harm me. So a single Slan taking down a unit of Pegasus Knights. In the Battle of the Middle, the Scarvet versus the Lord. The Lord, of course, had the higher initiative. It did a couple of wounds. The Scar Veteran managed to do exactly enough to kill his Lord. Now, the Scar Veteran overran and managed to reform. However, his much more powerful unit of knights charged, decimated, absolutely decimated that unit. And I thought to myself, I really need shield wall. They still fell back in good order, but they were taking on another charge. We won over here, and I think they fell back in good order last turn, and to cause them to flee. And the really surprising thing for me here was, look, sorry, I can't remember the names of the different types of knights in the Bretonnia, but the ones that weren't quite as good had absolutely no chance against the Croxagore. They rolled really poorly, even on the charge. I mean, they might have done a couple of wounds, but we just wiped out their unit and followed up. Meanwhile, uh, he's um, he's still stuck in this combat. I'm still trying to cast Hammer Hands and trying to get something through, and it wasn't working for me. But I was going to wear him down. He's still pegging arrows into my Carnosaur. Okay, so on my turn, the Carnosaur manages a rear charge against the knights. Now, because of a rather bizarre sort of old world rule, I mean, he should have challenged, but he was still able to use his lance. He still counted as having charged my Carnosaur, and I rolled quite poorly, and he didn't. And although I did kill it, we actually lost combat because of all the arrows, and I think he did a wound. I believe the Carnosaur was on maybe one wound. Um, Now, my Croxagore charged here, and he elected to flee because he didn't want to bear that charge. And then, very hilariously, I managed to cast Hammer Hands, and Hammer Hands did not do a single wound. And then the single attack that weapon skill 3, strength 4, that strength, weapon skill 3, strength 3, that the Slan had managed to wound, and that was enough. They broke, and we the Slan followed them up and ran them down. So that is a Slan soloing a unit of Pegasus Knights. At that point in time, he was, we were doing tests at the end of the turn to see if we were below 25%, and he was. And so I just flat out won, which, that decision to flee here was a really big deal. It may have been that because the Carnosaur was on a single wound, and because they accounted having charge, and because it was his turn next turn, feasibly he could have won if he had have tried to maybe just absorb that charge and hope for a fall back in good order. So yeah, Croxagore handled lesser cavalry very well. Now I was on eighth battle, so a lot of this stuff was new to me. Ethereal was very powerful. Mediocre shooting does really well on my build of a Carnosaur, and I quite like that because dragons with 5, 2+5+5+, something like that, they really ruin Friday night casual games. But when you got a Carnosaur, yeah, strength toughness 6 is incredible. Two unmodifiable 5+ saves is really good against characters wielding crazy magic weapons. It's about as good as it's going to get, but it's not that good against 20, 30 arrows. So kind of nice little leveler there, encouraging people to take core. Shield wall is definitely something to consider. You deprive those knights of their charge; it's a big deal. And the old world's great. You should get into it.